It's that time of year where a lot of students are walking down the convocation aisle and graduating from their undergrad or their post-grad degrees and entering out into the workforce. This is a really exciting time in people's lives. A huge congratulations on a major milestone, but it does mean you're kind of becoming an adult and brings up a lot of things when it comes to your personal finances. So today we're going to talk about sustainable investing for new graduates, and this is the advice that I wish someone had told me when I finished school. My name is Tim Nash. I'm a certified financial planner. I've helped more than 20,000 people invest according to their values. And I'm ready to help you figure out how to get started on your sustainable investment journey. So first off, congrats. Like, holy crap, this is a big deal. You finished school. That is amazing. Fingers crossed you were able to get a job. I know how tricky it is coming out graduation. I graduated right into the 2008 crash, and so there were no jobs available. So that's what kind of pushed me into the entrepreneurial route, forced me to start my business. But fingers crossed you found gainful employment, and you're now starting to bring in some money and trying to figure out, okay, how do I tackle my personal finances? So the first thing I want to do is tackle some of the pitfalls. So these are some of the mistakes that I want you to avoid, that when I see people kind of having financial independence for their first time, starting to make some money, right? You get that paycheck hitting your bank account every couple of weeks. It feels really, really good. But there's some common mistakes that people make. The first mistake is this idea of lifestyle inflation. This is this notion that you were used to a certain lifestyle when you were in school. There's a really good chance that you were quite frugal, that you lived with roommates, you probably ate cheaper food and just really didn't spend as much money. That's a very normal behavior when people are in school, and that now that you're out in the workforce, you're now going to be surrounded by people who are making more money than you, who have been in the workforce a lot longer than you, who have more things and have fancier tastes, right? And you're going to, by default, be sort of encouraged to level up your lifestyle and start spending a lot more money. I see this a lot with people who graduate from law school. As law students, had huge amounts of debt, were living very frugally, and now all of a sudden they get their first job with a law firm and they're surrounded by literal millionaires who now have so much money, who are wearing fancy clothes, driving fancy cars, taking fancy vacations, live in fancy homes or condos. And a lot of these young lawyers are looking at their peers and saying, hey, I want a piece of that. And the biggest mistake you can make is kind of jumping into that more expensive lifestyle too quickly. That really, I kind of want you to embrace some of those frugal living traits a little bit longer. That the longer you can keep your rent low, and the longer you can make your own lunch, and the longer you can shop for used clothing and, not buy all of the fancy stuff, really at the start of your investment career, that extra money every single month is going to go so far. That's like the number one thing you can do in terms of coming out of graduation into the workforce, is really avoiding that pitfall of lifestyle inflation. Because if you do want the fancy stuff that everyone else around you is now partaking in, there's a really good chance you're going to go into debt to get it. And coming out of school, like if you were lucky enough to graduate without student debt, hallelujah, like my goodness, well done. A lot of people already have some student debt coming out of school. And so if your spending starts to go up right away, before you're able to pay down that debt, we can really actually dig ourselves into a hole, especially if you take on more debt. So the first thing I want to teach you is really understanding the notion between good debt versus bad debt. To understand whether debt is good debt or not, right? And good debt has a lower interest rate where we can sit on it for a while. We don't have to pay it off right away. Bad debt is debt that has a high interest rate where we want to pay that off as quickly as possible. Now, to determine whether the interest rate is, it's good debt or bad debt, I want to introduce you to this concept called the risk-free rate of return. Okay? Now, this is the rate of return, the percentage interest rate that we can earn by taking zero risk. So using things like high interest savings accounts or GICs, guaranteed investment certificates, these are zero risk investments. They're not sexy. You're not going to make a lot of money with them, but it gives us a benchmark for how much we can earn by taking zero risk. Right now, we're looking at an interest rate of about 3.5% is kind of a zero risk rate of return in that ballpark. But I bring it up because, interest rates do go up and down. So you're going to want to look up GIC rates or what you can earn from a high interest savings account. And that anything that's below that number, so let's say the risk-free rate is 3.5%. If your debt is less than 3.5% interest, don't stress about it. That's fine debt to have, to sit on. That really do the minimum payments, but I don't want you to worry about paying that off right away. But when your interest rate is higher than that risk-free rate, so if it's higher than 3.5% right now, that's debt that we do want to pay off a lot faster. With student loans, oftentimes there is a difference between the federal portion, which is often zero interest rate for a while, versus the provincial portion, and this could depend what province you're in, which is often a higher interest rate. I want you to pay off that higher interest rate first. So, you often have to write a letter or do something like that where you can say, hey, I actually want all of my money to go to the provincial portion. And then don't stress about paying off the federal portion if it's, a low interest rate. You don't have to worry about that. Obviously, when it comes to something like a line of credit, that interest rate is going to be even higher. Credit card debt is often 20%, so way above that 3.5%, right? Credit card debt, bad debt. And then the worst kind of debt you can get in are these payday loans. Those are a huge red flag. Those often have 40%, 60% annualized interest rates, just bad news bears. Obviously, if we have any of that bad debt, we want to get rid of it right away. And really, we want to do everything that we can to avoid getting into those bad debt situations. So that's why, the best thing you can do is continue to live frugally and pay down those high interest rates debt. The longer you can do that, get that debt paid off, you're really going to set yourself up for the future. And then the next pitfall I want to talk about, and this is more geared towards the men in the audience, although, women will get it too, but this stuff is really targeted at men right now, which is that now that you're going to be making money, there's going to be a temptation. You're going to start getting some advertisements about sports gambling, things like prediction markets and day trading. You're going to start to see all this kind of stuff, whether it's crypto, whether it's, gambling apps on your phone. There are a lot of people that are going to be telling you that they're cheat codes for earning money, where it's sort of like get rich quick schemes. And I'm here to tell you the odds are not in your favor with these things at all. That this is a recipe for disaster. That if you start gambling on sports, if you start day trading or crypto trading or, playing around in these prediction markets, you are throwing money down the drain. You just are. It's tricky because psychologically, if you start doing and you start winning, right? You start to think, ooh, this is a cheat code. This is, I can, get rich quick. I can make money easily. But that very quickly turns into hubris. And so what's wild is that if you start gambling, and I'm going to call all of those things gambling, including day trading, I consider that gambling, that if you're gambling and you win, the psychology is that you should take more risk because you're so smart. You're winning, right? So of course I should take more risk, which is a problem. The more risk you take, it's only a matter of time before you do lose. But if you start gambling and you lose, the emotional side is that you're going to want to take more risk to make your money back. That's the default psychology. You're like, oh, now I've lost money. What do I want to do? I want to win that money back. So I'm going to take more risk. Anytime you use these gambling strategies, these, high risk strategies, it's really tricky because if you win, you take more risk. If you lose, you take more risk. They win no matter what. They make their money whenever you play, right? The transaction costs and the this and that. They just want you using these apps more and more. So my advice is just stay away from that. And if you have friends that are really into it, just tell them you think it's a bad idea. You're not going to get into it. I can't raise the alarm on this loud enough that the number of advertisements I see young people get, but especially young men get for gambling and crypto and day trading, it just really can be an absolutely huge pitfall that if you've got money left over at the end of the month, don't throw it down the drain with these things. Instead, we want to be planting seeds. We want to be investing that into the future. Those are really the big pitfalls. I'm sorry. I hate, the negative stuff, but now that that's out of the way, you're not going to fall into a trap of gambling. You're not going to fall into a trap of lifestyle inflation. Now we can start to talk about, okay, how do we actually build the foundation to set you up for the future? First thing you're going to want to do is set up your emergency fund. So an emergency fund, this is number one, everybody needs an emergency fund. Before we start investing at all, we want to have somewhere between 3 months expenses to 6 months expenses sitting in cash or a high interest savings account, something that is zero risk, where you are earning that risk-free rate of return. Again, it's not sexy, but this is your safety net. And especially early on in your career, I might even nudge you closer towards 6 months. That oftentimes getting started and early in your career, things are a little bit more precarious. And so having that 6-month emergency net is huge. Because what it means is that if you do end up losing your job, then no stress, no worries. We have lots of time to be able to replace that income. I often see young people refer to this as what's called a fuck off fund. And this is because when we are just getting started in life, sometimes we want to tell people to fuck off. We want to tell our boss to fuck off. We want to tell our parents to fuck off. Sometimes you're in a bad relationship and you need to tell your partner to fuck off. Too many people are trapped in a bad job, in a bad relationship, in a bad situation because they don't have an emergency fund. That if you don't have that money tucked away, you can end up in a really bad situation where you are trapped. And so having this emergency fund, especially early in your career, early in your life, is absolutely critical. So, for example, if you're spending, let's say $5,000 a month, on rent and expenses and, going out and food and all that fun stuff. Let's say you're spending, $5K a month. I want you to have somewhere between $15K, which is 3 months, and $30K, which is 6 months expenses, sitting in cash, doing nothing. Now, you can hold this inside of a TFSA, a tax-free savings account. TFSA is a really nice tax shelter, right? We can put money in, take money out. It's very flexible. And since you don't have investments yet, we might as well use your TFSA. Now, you might not have that much room depending how old you are. It does sort of accumulate every year. You get right now it's about $7,000, from the time you were 18. So depending how old you are, you'll have different amounts of room in your TFSA. So I want you to log into the MyCRA account. If you don't know your MyCRA account, you're going to want to sign up for that and get ready to start paying taxes and track all that fun stuff. When you log into your MyCRA account, there's a little section that says benefits and pensions, and that you can go in there, and that's where you can see your TFSA contribution room. And that's where, the starting point is that you can build an emergency fund inside of a TFSA. That way you're not paying taxes on that sort of roughly, 2.5% to 3.5% that you might be earning on your emergency fund. If you want to set up an ethical emergency fund, which I hope you do, I have an awesome mini course in my classroom called Ethical Emergency Fund, where we go through the practical ways, the different ways in which you can have an emergency fund and talk about the different sort of ethics of those different options. Once you've got your emergency fund, amazing, fantastic. Your pantry is all stocked up. You're ready in case something bad happens. Now we can start to look to the future. Now we can start actually investing your money. So hopefully we've gotten into this habit of every month, putting some money away, socking it away into that emergency fund. Once it's full, we leave it there. We just leave the emergency fund there in case we need it down the road. And that now we redirect those monthly contributions into an investment account. And this is where really, to get started, especially for people who are making their first investments, I've got this great mini course in the classroom called Start Investing in 15 Minutes. And I'll give you the quick sort of summary right now, but know that there is a little bit more information in the classroom if you want it. But really the steps towards starting to invest is number one, you're going to want to pick an online brokerage account. So this is going to be something like a Wealthsimple or a Questrade or a Qtrade. There are a bunch of different online brokers. Doesn't really matter which one, but you're going to want to pick an online broker. Number two is that you're going to want to open a TFSA. And again, for most people, you're going to want to start with this tax-free savings account. It's going to be your first place that you're going to start investing. Again, we are going to want to check in the MyCRA to make sure that we're not over contributing, especially if you've got your emergency fund already in there. At this point, we might actually consider pulling our emergency fund out of the TFSA and using it for investments instead. But what we're going to want to do is to open up a TFSA at an online brokerage. We're going to put money into that account. We're going to fund our account. And then we're going to choose what's called an all-in-one ETF. An ETF stands for Exchange Traded Fund. This is a fund like a mutual fund, but it's not sold to you by the salesperson. I don't want you to walk into a bank or credit union and get sold a mutual fund. Instead, I want you to learn how to buy an exchange traded fund yourself. It's going to be 90% cheaper than a mutual fund. ETFs are amazing. And this is where we want to get started. And we want to get started with all-in-one ETFs because these are really what I call a frozen pre-made pie. That when it comes to building an investment portfolio, we're baking a pie. You know, the bonds are the crust of the pie. The stocks are the filling of the pie. What we want to do when we're getting started is to buy a frozen pre-made pie known as an all-in-one ETF. I've got a list of all the different sustainable all-in-one ETFs on my website, goodinvesting.com. So if you go into my free tools, there's a list of all-in-one ETFs that you can see there. And in my classroom, I teach you how to choose which one is right for you. But basically, that's going to be the process to start investing. What we're going to do is we're going to be buying an ETF. We're going to have our pie inside of our tax shelter, which sits inside of an online brokerage account. That's how we start investing our money. And if you can start investing now when you're young, oh my goodness, the benefits are massive. Because when it comes to investing, it doesn't matter so much how much you invest. What matters is how long you stay invested. So I would way rather someone get started early with a small dollar amount rather than wait, 10 or 20 years, but then start investing with a larger amount. No. The most important thing you have is time for your investments to compound, to work for you. So the earlier you can get started with your investments, right, the more time you're going to have for those plants to grow. Those, what start as seeds, we plant seeds, they grow into plants, they turn into trees, right? Trees can take decades to grow. If we can start planting trees now, you're going to be setting yourself up so well. Whether you want to go back to school later, whether you want to buy a house, whether we're saving for retirement, whether, you want to start your own business down the road, all of these things take money to do, right? I know it feels a little bit funny thinking about your future self when, you've just finished school and you're just getting started, but I'm telling you, this is the number one most important thing that you can do. Getting started early on the market is just so critical. Advice I wish someone had told me is like, Tim, don't spend your money now. Save it, let it compound. You'll have so much more money available to you a little bit later on. That's really, my advice to you. Congrats on graduating. I'm so proud of you. You get to become an adult now and do all of these wonderful things and learn about taxes and credit cards and interest rates and investments, so lots of fun stuff. These are the things that I wish someone had told me when I was young. If you're watching this and you're a little bit older, what are the things that you wish someone had told you? If you're younger and just getting started, what are the things that resonated? What are the questions that you still have? Would love to hear your questions and comments. I hope you got a lot out of this episode. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time.